Now, capital letter E, the 5 penalties on the first sin. The 5 penalties on the first sin. I think this might help us with that question. 5 penalties on the first sin. Number 1, on sinners immediately. On the sinners immediately. That's one of the penalties of the first sin. On sinners immediately. Genesis 3:7. They have, letter A, a sense of guilt evidenced by making a covering. They have a sense of guilt as evidenced by making a covering. Verse 7. Secondly, with regard to the penalty on sinners, there's a dread of the displeasure of God. They hid. Verse 8. Along with that, letter C, a loss of fellowship. A loss of fellowship. Obviously, they dreaded the displeasure, so they hide, and in hiding, they lose fellowship with God. Ever try to avoid your parents when you had a bad day? It's predictable, isn't it? Come home, you're happy. Look forward to seeing you. Come home, bad day. You're not around when mom and dad walk in. Get to the place, you don't even, if you're in a school that offers demerits as a fringe benefit to your children, you'll get to the place where you won't even have to ask them, did you get demerits? Just walk in 1 second, look at their face, they'll tell you. And that's the way, that's the way it was with Adam and Eve. They sin, now there's guilt, they dread the displeasure, and they hide. Lost fellowship. So they sinners immediately faced a penalty. Number 2, the second penalty was on the serpent. Genesis 3:14. And the Lord said unto the serpent, this is after it went through the blame game, right? Verse 11. Hast thou eaten of the tree? Verse 12. Adam. Her. The Lord says to the woman. 13. What have you done? Eve. It. The serpent. Verse 14. No excuses, right? And no excuses from the serpent. Why? Who's he going to blame? You didn't let me be God. It's your fault. And the Lord doesn't ask the serpent anything either, does he? Verse 14, see that? He doesn't ask. He doesn't ask. So, on the serpent, here, verse 14, the penalty is crawling on the ground. Crawling on the ground. Eat dust, right? That's the original eat dust statement there. Eating dust. This utter defeat. That is a symbol of utter defeat. And secondly, enmity between the man and the serpent. Enmity between the man and the serpent. You don't have to write this down, but Charles Ryrie said this. The serpent was condemned to crawl, perhaps as a sign of degradation and or perhaps indicating that it was an upright creature before this penalty was imposed. There's some hints about that, and I think it's Ezekiel. Every precious stone was thy covering in the Garden of Eden. The workmanship of thy tabrets and thy pipes was created in thee. And so the serpent, Lucifer, there, very musical, very beautiful. So that could be the case. And even in the millennium, right, the great millennium, the lion and the lamb sitting down together. Let's look real quick there at Isaiah 65:25. Isaiah 65:25. the lamb shall feed together. That's pretty, that's nice. The lion shall eat straw like the bullock. The lion eats straw? That's going to be funny, isn't it? The lion eats straw. But look at this third one. Isn't that interesting? The serpent keeps eating dust. It will lick the dust, the symbol of humiliation, disappointment, defeat. Genesis 3:14. Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly thou shalt go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. Third penalty on sin was on Eve. Genesis 3:16. The enmity back in 15, by the way, this is a proto-evangelium verse, or proto-first gospel. First gospel. Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. That second seed is capitalized there. It shall bruise thy. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his, capital H, Jesus's, heel. You will bruise the heel. You'll strike a temporary blow on the seed of the woman, the Messiah. A temporary blow, not permanent because of the resurrection. He will bruise thy head. That's a fatal death blow. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The seed of the woman. Starting with Eve, every Jewish woman thought that she could be giving birth to the Messiah. Seed promise started here. It was fulfilled in Mary, 4,000 years later. But even when Eve gave birth to Cain, in that phrase, I have gotten a man from the Lord, there's the way the Hebrews set up there. Could be that she's saying, I've gotten a man, this is the Lord, this is the Messiah. So the hope of every Hebrew woman was to be the mother of Messiah.
If since salvation has always been through grace and faith, no matter what dispensation, then would that have been salvation for Adam and Eve to trust in the promise of the seed?
Yeah, and they started to recognize some things about this. They started to recognize that they could not atone. There was never a work salvation, and their sin caused death. They see that here in that first gospel, Genesis 3:15. They see it later when the animals are killed to make them coverings for their sins. So the seed promise, faith in that seed, and recognition that their sins could not be atoned for of their own selves. So Eve here, she has two punishments. A, conception. She's going to have sorrow in conception, verse 16. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow in thy conception. In sorrow shalt thou bring forth children. Secondly, there is a hierarchy of rule. A continued system for a fallen world. A hierarchy of rule. Thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And this is seen in 1 Corinthians 11:3, 1 Corinthians 14:34, Ephesians 5:24-25. You don't have to have all these. Titus 2:3-5, 1 Peter 3:1 and 5 and 6. This hierarchy of rule. Number 4, the fourth penalty on the first sin was on Adam. Genesis 3:17. Unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. The sweat of thy brow shalt thou eat bread till thou return unto the ground. For out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and in the dust thou shalt return. Number one, there's a curse on the ground. Letter B, there's death on him and all his offspring. The day that Adam sinned, he began to die. Letter C, he was expelled from the garden. Verse 24, so he drove out the man. Verse 23, sent him forth from the Garden of Eden. And that garden was cherubims and a flaming sword. Adam's curses. Curse on the ground, death on him and his offspring, and thirdly, expulsion from the garden. Fifth is the penalty on all the human race. So 5 penalties of the first sin. On sinners immediately, on the serpent, on Eve, on Adam, on the whole human race. 6 points, quickly. Letter A, all men are born sinful. Romans 5:12. Letter B, all men are under the curse of sin. Romans 3:19. All men are under the curse of sin. Romans 3:19. Now we know that what things soever the law saith, it saith to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before God. 3. All unsaved men are the children of Satan. Boy, Satan got what he wanted there in the garden, didn't he? John 8:44. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. 1 John 3:8-10 also points this out. Letter D. The whole race is in captivity to sin and Satan. The whole race is in captivity to sin and Satan. Ephesians 2:3. We were by nature the children of wrath. By nature, the children of wrath. Ephesians 2:3. Letter E. The entire nature of man is corrupted. Ephesians 4:18. Having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of the heart. The entire nature is corrupted. Jeremiah 17:9 says this. Titus 1:15. Romans 7:18. Lastly, letter F, all men are subject to death. Romans 5:12 and 14. We read that. Romans 5:12. All men are subject to death. So with regard to today, the fall of the first man, letter D, we had Eve's realization she was caught in the transgression, deceived by sin. Adam's responsibility, to him is attributed to sin nature. Sin's seriousness, those are very important points to remember, the 4 points underneath sin's seriousness. Because that answers the question, why such a big punishment for what, from human perspective, is such a small offense, right? The problem is not the punishment or the severity of it, the problem is our perspective on disobedience to God. Even small. And then the 5 penalties for the first sin. There's a penalty on sinners immediately. Guilt, dread, loss of fellowship. on the serpent, never gets past that curse, even in the millennium. The wolf and the lamb, the lion are having a blast. The serpent's over there. Man, I'm going to get another meal. I think I'm going to have some more dust. I have a little bit of like mud with that dust. Get a little thirst. On Eve, conception, hierarchy of rule. On Adam, curse on the ground. Death on him and his offspring. Expulsion from the garden. And fifthly, the entire human race. 6 important points under that.